I wanted to give my testimony. And what I mean by testimony is how I got saved, how I became a Christian. And I would say my story begins when I was in elementary school, or even maybe even before elementary school. And I had my good friend growing up, his name's Eddie, and his brother, who was older than him, was a Christian and started going to meetings. And so he was a good influence on him. And since he, being my best friend, you know what he said? One day he said, you need to believe in God. And I said, yeah, you know what? I need to believe in God. It's because my friend said so. So I said, yes, I need to believe in God. And when you're at that age, you are very, how do you say, influenced by your friends, especially your best friends. And so from then on, what I told my parents is, we have to go to church. So from then on, what happened was I started going to different churches or different meetings. I was going from one to another. Sometimes my parents, actually most of the time they would just have me go with family friends to their particular meeting. And it's because I didn't know why I wanted to go, but I was just having fun. And, it's all because I told my parents that we had to go, or I had to go. And so I was having fun. And I did genuinely believe in God, but I didn't know who God was. And it wasn't until a year or two later, this was when I was in second or third grade, but a year or two later, then that's when things in our family changed. So what happened was, my mom was home one day and she got a visit from a sister whom she didn't know at the time. And this sister lived down the street, her family did. And she knocked on our door and she preached the gospel to my mom. And I don't know how long it took, but whether it was over a period of time or not. But long story short, my mom got saved. And I remember, maybe it was, I don't know what the timeline was. I have to ask my mom, but maybe a couple weeks later, I remember getting picked up. Me and my brother getting picked up by another brother and his siblings. He was a young high schooler back then who started to drive, but he took us to the church in Cerritos meeting hall. And I remember that was my first children's meeting. And I remember a lot about that day. I remember some of the songs we sang. I remember my first children's meeting teacher. And I even tell her that to this day. But, from then on, I was put in an environment where I was, even though I believed in God, this was an environment where I started to know about God. And eventually I did get baptized when I was in 8th grade. And I remember we were at some blending meeting or some bigger meeting in Anaheim. And I remember I was baptized there. And I was baptized with a few other brothers and sisters. And anyway, that was like one my first major milestone in my Christian life. But I would say I still was getting to know God. But I remember very specifically where my first touch of God was, where I first really had a big turn to God. That big turn I had to the Lord happened in that junior high conference later that spring. The brother who was speaking was talking about the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea. And I remember him specifically saying, that crossing of the Red Sea is you. That's your baptism. And I remember specifically just being so struck, because that's the first time the Bible became the Word of God to me, and it wasn't just a book of stories. And from there, God was so real to me in that moment. And so from then on, I remember just having a big turn that time. And from then on, I mean, I've had a lot of different times where I've really touched the Lord. I can think of so many different moments. Uh, but since then, it's just, I think my growth, my Christian life has been just a normal path of just a lot of ups and downs, but a lot of just real growth moments in the Lord, real touches in the Lord. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit about my salvation story and how I even just got to this point in my Christian life.